This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp to provide you with access to the largest online therapy service in the world. And it can all be done from the comfort of your own home, from a phone, tablet or laptop. No commute, cutting down travel costs, and most importantly, it's affordable. With over 1,000 therapists in the UK, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a wide variety of expertise in mental health. If you need someone to talk to and you're thinking of giving therapy a go, BetterHelp is a great option. And being a listener of the podcast, you get 10% off. That's 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lifeinfilm. That's betterhelp.com/lifeinfilm. Welcome to A Life in Film. I'm Elliot James Langridge. I'm an actor, writer, and apparently a podcaster, and I love film. This is the podcast that we ask our guests from in front and behind the camera, how did they get their foot in the door? What was the key to unlocking their success? What's their story? Previous guests include Toby Jones, Sam Clement, Natalie Emmanuel, Andrea Riseborough, and Tony Curran, to name a few. Today's guest is a casting director who's been on the top of their game for over 20 years. From casting The Fifth Element, Batman Begins, Gravity, Wonder Woman, Blade Runner 2049, she's worked with many of her collaborators multiple times, including Guy Ritchie on Snatch, Aladdin and The Gentlemen. She continues to find new and exciting ways to build a cast. We chat about the casting process that led to Hugh Grant playing 6 different roles in the Wachowski's Cloud Atlas and his show-stealing role in The Gentlemen. We discuss some of her favourite films, including The Godfather, and why Spartacus blew her mind as a child. And of course, she gives auditioning advice to actors. Our guest today is casting director Lucinda Syson.
It's a life in film. 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 Woo!
Hello.
Sorry, it's one of those days today where it's just...
Oh, no worries at all. Thank you for taking the time and doing this. I know that you're obviously very, very busy all the time, so I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this. Thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate you choosing me. And I'm sort of casting directors, I think, always regard themselves as slightly sort of behind, along the sides and sort of, behind the curtain in a sense, or behind the camera even. And it's, it's really nice.
People, we have guests of all kind of, behind, in front of the camera, cast, crew, post-production, pre-production, everything. And some of our most popular episodes are with the casting directors. And it's because it's the I think it's a really interesting part of the process. It's already early on. It's, you get the script and then it's the casting. And so a lot of our audience really react to that. And I'm sure there's a lot of actors that are obviously listening, trying to find out wisdom and tricks to, getting that next job. But yeah, they're our most popular episodes. Which,
well, that's amazing. That's great.
Yeah. So, there you go. No pressure. But yeah, if we go straight into it and ask you, how did it all begin? Where did that love of casting come from?
I've been asked this question before, so I hadn't actually thought about it so much. And then it gave me time to think, where is it from? And I actually take the route to seeing Spartacus at the age of 7.
All right.
And I remember it blowing my mind, literally blowing my mind. I think I was so enraptured. And just for me, always was, obviously there's a story there, but it was the cast. It was the cast and the actors who made me dream in that film, and maybe took me through that film. And so I think I'm always looking at the actors. And even now, that's an absolute pain, because you try and watch a film for pleasure and leisure, whatever, and definitely there's a sort of link going out and look at the actors all the time. So I think really from a pretty young age, the fascination wasn't the lighting, wasn't locations, wasn't the film grain, or even, I mean, story obviously important, but definitely I think the actors. So little did I know, it was all beyond me anyway.
It's funny, isn't it, how you say watching a movie, sometimes you have to kind of look at the casting and think, oh well, what would I have done? And I have my mum, my dad, and myself are all in the industry, but in different parts. So my mum was a makeup artist, my dad was a cameraman, and I'm an actor. So whenever we watched the film together, it was just a nightmare, because my dad would be picking apart the camera work, my mum would pick on the makeup, and I'd be like, well, he's rubbish. And it's that thing, isn't it, where do you struggle on a daily basis? Like when you're watching a movie, is it hard to sort of switch that side of it off and just watch a movie and enjoy it?
Yeah, because I mean, what's lovely is watching easy casting, when something's beautifully cast and you're just in that place because the actors are just hitting such high sort of levels. I mean, it's like there's an absolute deep-rooted pleasure in watching something like, for me, like The Godfather, or just a film I love, because you just the actors, for me, just you travel you, so you're just in this other world. So I am always conscious, and it's difficult because there's also, casting's a funny area, because it's sort of what's good casting, what's bad casting, what works, what doesn't. Sometimes a film is delivered to an audience and you take it as a whole, and not such good casting is accepted, in a way. And I think it's so subliminal. So when you're completely in a film and enjoying the performances, I think that's when the really good casting is, you're in that zone of really good casting. So I think you're always, and I'm sure a lot of casting directors are always conscious of the actors and the acting, and when it's sort of hitting, because it's, as I said, I think casting is always a question. And the only time for me that it hits that zone of, perfect casting is when you are lost in the film and in your spiritually kind of lost. And that's when everything's kind of functioning, and so it has a synchronicity that takes you out of yourself. So that's why I think it's a very subtle, nuanced, and definitely very difficult balance to get. But yeah, I think long answer is you're always kind of conscious of the casting, and when you're enjoying someone's performance,
Is there a piece of casting that you recently that you thought, wow, that was not what I expected, or something that kind of really took you by surprise recently? And I say that being someone else's casting, obviously, that's something you've watched. And
I'm trying to think recently. Nothing is springing to mind, but that doesn't, that's, I'm trying to, because I think nowadays a big thing of our profession is that you are saturated between kind of watching films for Oscars, watching films. I mean, I have to say, All Quiet on the Western Front is a great friend of mine, Simone Bear. I mean, I love her casting. I think she was an artist, true artist in her casting, and she literally, I don't know, just her casting has got this other level to it. So yeah, I think probably the most recent was All Quiet on the Western Front, and my goodness, you felt sort of battered when you came out. So there's a lot. The music, obviously, as well in that film was sort of hard hitting, and the directing, but the casting, you felt for that boy, that French soldier dying in the pits, the dirt, the mud, the total suffering. And I think the cast were really, really nice. Like the crazy guy that was always kind of you know. But I think also the leading actor, it was his first real big sort of film.
Yeah.
So I'd say for me, the most recent would be that, I think. You know,
I mean, it's a brilliant film. That we had the writer actually on the podcast, and she was explaining, you know, a whole story of the fact that she was a triathlete and that she had to compete to keep the money for the rights and everything else. Amazing story. And then obviously when the film comes out, it was one of those movies, as you say, wasn't thinking about the acting, I wasn't thinking about the casting, I wasn't thinking about anything because I was totally immersed in it. Yeah, incredible. And for it to be on Netflix as well, you kind of expect it not to be a big screen experience, but I saw it on a big screen and it was just, wow, blew me away.
Absolutely. You know, same here. I saw it at a screening, and what was amazing is this, someone next to me just couldn't take it. I think when the soldier with the spoon towards the end, it's like,
yeah.
And I think she just couldn't take it and sort of turned away. And, you know, and I kind of, you know, I loved the films, you know, everyone's got their favourite films. I love also the films of the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, you know, the flower bed of the Scorseses and the Spielbergs and especially for Big Coppola, and those kind of quite really thought-provoking films, and where you come out affected. And All Quiet on the Western Front was my dad always used to go on about the book. So I had a sort of particular, I never read it, but he always used to say it's a good book to read, good book. And so I actually went with my brother for the first screening, and I think we both came out, said, okay, let's go and get a drink. And Albert Schutt, you know, was the actor who actually invited me there because I'd sort of met him before, and he's a fantastic, I always kept an eye on him. He's a fantastic German actor, who plays the soldier who gets shot in the wood at the end. And it just is one of those ones you have to digest and stays with you. And I think that's also a mark of incredible casting, because as you said, you aren't anywhere else, you're there, you're with them, and you come out really having had an experience rather than being an audience and just watching something. It's an experience, and that I think is really a sign of really nice casting. As I say, casting is a very, very subtle, difficult area to get right. I suppose it's like music, isn't it? Those notes have to somehow, with all those different elements and instruments, have to hit the right sound. And I think that's the same with acting. It can't be taken on its own either. It's sort of, you know, and what I love about what we do in casting is it's such the raw base root material, in a sense, where you see an actor try some costumes on and suddenly they grow and get into the role more and have their hair done and sort of get on set and with other actors in the different roles. And it's sort of, it's a really lovely process. And then to see it all kind of work is amazing. And I really very, very firmly believe, you know, in the creative side of casting, there's such a practical side that goes on nowadays with deals and dates and nightmares, but just, you know, that the essence of casting is the creative and is working as a department to try and create these, just a, you know, bring the story to life with the right, as close to the right sort of people as you can together and not singularly. I think there's such a fallacy nowadays with actors being, you know, famous actors greenlighting films, etc. And you know, they were great in that film, they were great in that film, let's put them together. And chemistry is so important. That's why the synchronicity, the sound of music, it's, you know, it's sort of the right notes blending, creating the right sound. It's the same for me, it's the same with actors and acting and speech and dialogue and emotions and everything. So Anyway,
It must be tempting though, the films that you've done, it's an insane level of, some of the cast is just incredible. It must be tempting because you probably have access to all these big names, but then, as you say, it does sometimes come down to, actually, if you've got two big names, it might not work. But a lot of your cast are one I wanted to ask about in particular. There's a few, in fact, but one of them was The
which
Gentlemen.
one?
The Gentlemen, with, casting, you've cast Hugh Grant quite a few times in projects, but in projects that are not something people would expect him to be, that those characters are different, which I really enjoy seeing him do things like that. But how do you persuade that this person can do something so different?
Well, first I've got to, so Hugh Grant, sort of from my casting perspective, was really the Wachowskis. Always cast left field, and that was them really. That was not, we sort of orchestrated him meeting them, but that was more them exploring and always casting kind of left field, and that's they were great at that. And it's because they were such auteurs in a sense. I think this is the thing where they wrote, and invest themselves, and they were sort of completely immersed in what they were trying to achieve. And so they knew their kind of characters. So I think they did want to create some friction and difference. So you're like, oh, what's Hugh Grant doing dressed like that? So that was sort of, the sort of Wachowskis. And I think with The Gentlemen, that was actually Guy Ritchie having a bit of a bike accident.
Oh, right.
So I think so this is where casting is also kind of sometimes random. So I think Guy saw Hugh at a certain point, and then just thought, right, got to have you in my film. And I think so I'm not on that bit of casting. I'm not really, that wasn't my genius idea. That was definitely sort of the casting fates in a sense. But it is nice, and it's really, I think, to take risks and chances, and as you say, sort of, you can take, for example, on Snatch, we had Brad Pitt wanting to work on Guy Ritchie's next film, and I don't know if you've seen it, but it's how many roles are there for Brad Pitt? It's like so we did have a discussion on where he could possibly go, and it was too on the nose to be Frankie Four Fingers and too young. It's like, so to make him Mickey, he needed an Irish accent. So I think he probably knows, Brad's Irish accent. It's a difficult accent. Remember Devil's Own or whatever. He did an Irish accent there.
Very different Irish accent.
Very different. Very different. So it was an inspired moment. I have to say, I do love that story where he came in and as Guy really saying, right, okay, let's speed this fella up. And I thought it was genius,
Yeah, it's iconic, really. That whole thing is, it's very, very funny. It's almost, I can't remember, I haven't seen it for a while, but it feels like it should almost have subtitles. The way that he's speaking is so funny. I'm obviously not Irish, so I can't comment. I don't know. But to me, it sounded great.
I do. The amount of people who actually ask me, they come in and they sort of, do you like dogs? Do you like dogs? And, it is, I do love that. It's just, we didn't know what we were doing in a sense. That is quite a long time ago. And that was very difficult because we had a high bar in a way, but we didn't kind of want fake accents and all that kind of stuff. And it was, a real mix of characters. There was sort of, people had no acting experience at all. And we sort of tested them out. Addy, very, very little experience at that point. But just, it was really great taking the risk on them and creating this kind of world. And I think to this day, I still love watching that film. I really do.
When you look back to doing something like that, and then you see obviously all the people that came from that, Stephen Graham and all these people that, they've got substantial parts in the film. But they're so good in it that you think, oh, maybe that's them and they're playing themselves. But then you see Stephen Graham playing completely, and it's just incredible. It must be pretty satisfying to watch something like that and then see them all grow as actors down the line and do amazing things. I guess Snatch is one of those films that is full of young talent that went off and did incredible work.
It is, and some actors are, like, I think Alan Ford was so iconic in Snatch. It's difficult to follow up. But I think it's sometimes you can afford to put a very famous actor somewhere, and sometimes you can't. It's just trying to have the sensitivity to kind of know where it feels right and where it doesn't. You can have really top heavy casts where the names are all there, and it's like, starring so and so and so and so, and it's like you remember the days of the Towering Inferno films where everyone was in those films, from Steve McQueen to Paul Newman. I mean, all of them were sort of either a fireman and I think there was a time for that. I think it's nowadays you've got to be really careful, because I think the studios have got the reassurance of a name, but the casting doesn't work. It doesn't work. And if it's too top heavy and distracting, I mean, I think a lot of casting directors would say it's really great to have the freedom to cast a film properly and closely, and to get the casting right, and not have to accommodate sort of some casting, and you have to, because films are very expensive to make, but that just really disrupts the casting in a sense, and that's difficult. But I think audiences are used to sort of the name laden films, that they can be as enjoyable or whatever. Now with Fast and Furious and things like that, you watch for those kind of characters. So
is that a common occurrence then, where sometimes you have got all these big names, but you're kind of like, we need to now make this work because maybe it's not quite right? Is that something that kind of happens, or?
I think you just, I mean, do you mean with casting, sort of, you've got the names, now you've got to make it work? Or?
Yeah, well, I mean, you see a lot of films that, especially with, like, when you have a movie that has cameos and they turn up and things like that, and you kind of feel like sometimes they've been crowbarred in. Do you get a lot of pressure? I'll reword the question a bit better than I did before, but do you get a lot of pressure from the studio sometimes to be like, well, you need to cast this person, but you're thinking they're great, but they're not right? Does that
That's a good question.
Don't worry, I can cut anything out you're not comfortable with, but that is quite a hard question to answer without being
that's giving it all away. That's giving it all away. So I mean, it's kind of creative opinion is a funny thing as well, because there are some people who come across as, I know I'm right, and this is it. And I think sometimes you can be drawn by that. Oh, well, they're so sure about that, they must be right, and we'll follow that. But I think you have to keep questions going, and I think you have to, because actors can be writing roles, but you've got to cast, you've got to create a cast, you've got to bring the world alive. And again, it's the chemistry. I do believe from early days, and I'm sure we can talk about this sort of now in because it's far off in the distance, but we didn't test Diane Kruger and Orlando Bloom in Troy because we couldn't. He was far away, he was shooting, it's just impossible. And I sort of learned a lesson from that, because it's like you really, especially when there's love interest, and especially when the whole premise of the story is based on believing in the love of those two characters. I think it really is, I believe, essential just to have those two people in the room and test that chemistry out. I think it's always a good thing, because you just kind of sit in front of you. But there's a play on at the moment called Motive and the Cue at the National. I don't know if you.
Oh right, no, I haven't
see
heard
it.
of that.
So Sam Mendes has directed it, and it's really about the doubt, or from my perspective, is about the doubt Gielgud has with Richard Burton, who's just playing a rough Hamlet and not how Hamlet should be, but he's finding the role. And then, of course, he goes on to be the best sort of Hamlet and run on Broadway forever and ever. And I think it's just taking that as a point. But sometimes it's not on the plate in front of you. Sometimes work has to go in, and it's not on a shelf. Actors don't sort of come ready wrapped in a packet saying, "Yeah, I'm perfect this role." There has to be work done around that, and I think that's also a big thing. And I think for me, it's a lot to do with feeling, and if someone feels right and feels right with another person, it's you've got to build a cast, and they don't. I think with money and time nowadays, there's not very much we can get there sort of attitude. It's certainly time costs money, so it's like, well, we need as close to as possible, so we sort of need that premise of pulling an actor off a shelf, unwrapping them, and off they go. And I think that's it has to happen sometimes, but it's a shame, because I think there's also that possibility of actors finally doing some work, thinking and getting into the role. And also, I go back to The Godfather, which I think is just astounding. Cast.
Brilliant.
And Marlon Brando with his cotton wool in his mouth. And just Al Pacino, who was just unknown. And I think these are, obvious, remarkable casting examples. But it's like Dustin Hoffman in The Graduate, and it's just off-peak casting. It's not, that wasn't Robert Redford, it wasn't Warren Beatty, and it wasn't beautiful. It was Dustin Hoffman.
There seemed to be I was listening to another podcast about, I can't remember what it was even about, but they mentioned the fact that there was an era where people like Dustin Hoffman, Gene Hackman, all these people, Kiefer Sutherland. Is it Kiefer Sutherland? Yeah, Kiefer Sutherland. No, Donald Sutherland. That kind of generation of actors where they didn't necessarily look like Robert Redford, but there was this other, all these leading men that were kind of the average guy, the everyday. And I don't know, do you think that's still a thing now? Because I feel like also the movie star is kind of almost, that's changed as well. We've gone through different stages, I think, in the last sort of couple of decades. But yeah, what stage would you say we're in now? What is the kind of, is there a fashionable thing at the moment that people are doing in casting?
I think because there's so much casting now with streaming and everything else, I think there's lots and lots and lots of productions going on. And I think you're right. I think, and because so the focus is sort of dissipated, it's sort of, there's so many productions. And so you've sort of got a choice of sort of, I don't know, just so much to watch. But it's interesting because within that choice, you certainly suddenly get everyone talking about certain shows, Breaking Bad, Ozark, whatever, and they all tend to be really strong casts and really good storylines. And it's like recently it's sort of Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey. It's like, who knew? They're great,
been around
really
for ages as
watchable.
well, and then suddenly like huge.
I mean, look, Dave, I'm very biased because I also think other things obviously are important, but casting brings it's the life, isn't it? It's the life of the story. It's sort of so it is so important, and sometimes I think that's overlooked a little bit. And it's like,
100%.
well, let's get the name, get reassurance of the name, and it's lovely. I know that has to happen, but it's lovely to also work with directors, showrunners who kind of want to explore a bit, want to take a chance, want to give people sort of so I mean, and I think you're right on. There used to be the Jack Nicholson. There's a Jack Nicholson film, and recently it's just not so much that way, is it? It's sort of it's a funny time because it is transitioning into something else. Not quite sure what else, but there's definitely less of, I'm going to see the latest Gene Hackman film or Jack Nicholson film.
It's funny how Tom Cruise seems to be, he's still a movie star. But then if you look at the new wave, which I guess a lot of them are sort of almost established by Marvel, I guess, like Chris Hemsworth, people like that, they are huge stars, but it's not the same as it was in the 80s and 90s where it was like their name will make sure the film succeeds. It's kind of, it's not a sure thing anymore.
No.
But I guess, as you say, a lot of competition, there's streaming, there's also cinemas fighting that, and it's there's so many different elements now that I guess it makes it less clean cut than it was. I've realized how much time we've already spent. I've been literally blabbering on, and I can't believe how quickly the time's gone. I've just looked and I was like, whoa.
I know. No, you're lovely. You're so lovely and easy to talk to. So
we've just been geeking out about films, really. I should have asked you more questions about you. I'm just like, the Godfather is great. I know. There are a lot more films. It's like they'll go out of your head when you sort of. When you mentioned The Godfather, though, I wanted to ask: have you seen the series The Offer?
I started watching it a little bit, and because it's one of my favourite kind of stories, is the making of the God. It always sort of perplexed me because it's like, how on earth do these films get made? I mean, certainly The Godfather. How that Coppola locking himself in a room.
Yeah.
Credit cards, and
it's crazy.
I think it's lovely. It's like, kind of.
I have no idea how much because I haven't read about the making of the film. I've only kind of seen it from that show, and I don't know how much of how closely, that is to the truth. But if any of that's true, it's just insane. It's crazy.
I think a lot of it. I mean, I knew that was from one sort of perspective. I knew that the film had gone down quite a few times. It was B movie. It's like some Italian bloke. Let's put this guy on there, Coppola, whatever his name is. Who does he want? So I'm going, Al who? Pacino. Okay. It went down, I think, about 3 times, and then but by the time it kind of got gay, let's greenlight that. Al Pacino was on another film, and they pulled him off it. That legally pulled him off. Marlon Brando, they needed him to go on tape, and so he had to go around and sit outside his house. Which I was so fortunate to work with Tony Scott as Spy Game, and he told me how he sat outside Marlon Brando's house. I think it's to do an advert.
Really?
Yeah, he literally sat outside. He said, I sat out there for I think a couple of days, and he finally came out. I don't know. They're just such great personalities, and
Yeah, I love stories like that. It's great.
just genius. And yes, the offer. I mean, so a lot of that's true. And I think when you go back into a lot of the big dramas, I mean, even to think that Apocalypse Now was first of all recasting the lead with Harvey Keitel, over there, and then bumping into Martin Sheen in the airport and going, could you go and play the lead? And then from that to over 1 million foot of film, literally 1 million foot of film, and having to edit for I think 1.5 years or something. And Marlon Brando, I mean, I love you. Have you seen the documentary making?
Is it Heart of Darkness?
Heart of Darkness.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost as good as the film.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
That line where Coppola's in the caravan, he sort of says, "I've already paid Marlon 1 million. What do you mean he's not coming?" It's just
so good. And then it was Martin Sheen had a heart attack on set.
Yeah.
And it's just all these crazy things. You just thought, God, it just sounds like the film is going to fall apart. And then it comes out and it's an absolute classic. It's crazy. I'm intrigued to see, because Coppola's he's got that new movie coming out. I can't remember what it's called. Not Dystopia, but I can't remember what it's called, but something like that. I'm very intrigued because obviously he hasn't done a film for a long time, and his films are always pretty epic. So I'm looking forward to the behind the scenes on that coming up. See how that. I
think now they might be a bit more.
You hope.
But I do think it was those were sort of the wild times, and I love. I mean, I things. Also, like the casting and changing casting, it's like I think just another beautifully cast film is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
And
you look at Danny DeVito, all those guys, Brad Dourif, and I just thought it's a pleasure. You just kind of sit and adore what you're watching. It's like you can't get enough. And Jack Nicholson as well. I mean. What an amazing actor.
Incredible. When he comes out and they all think that he's been affected and they're all looking at him like, oh, they got him. And it's such a great moment.
Oh my God.
Yeah, insane. So I love that era of film. I think, the 70s, I really enjoy the 80s as well. And the 90s. All the films that come out now, I think you almost need a space between them to be able to watch them in 10 years time and appreciate them more, because I think films that come out now are as good, but I feel it takes time sometimes to appreciate what is good and what how it grows over time. But I'll let you go in a second. I just want to ask one more question, because this is something that a lot of actors, me included, but actors listen to this, it's always the question that is asked and people want to know. When you are casting something and you have someone come in, what are you looking for? I mean, obviously you're looking for someone to embody the role and be that, but I guess there are no tricks to it. But what kind of advice would you give to an actor coming in and reading for you?
Every single project is completely different. It's completely different. It's a completely different story, set of people running it, requirements, the level of casting. Where's their focus? Is it on the stories and the lighting on? And sometimes you get directors who really are actor focused, and that's wonderful for casting because it really is the plug-in, and they will focus on casting and kind of know where they're going. So it's much easier for a casting director to know about the casting side and choice of actors, etc. It's sometimes just beyond any of us at a certain point, some directors are that close to the actor. Others want the actor to breathe, but it's it's a creative profession. To draw rules of thumb is very difficult. Some directors or showrunners don't want to give the scenes out. Some do. Some want. So you can't be everything and you can't be everything to everyone. I think you've got to be who you are, prepare yourself best you can, and read the text and understand what you're doing as much as you can, and ask those questions as well. Ask the questions. As I say, the sillier the question, the better. Just even those simple questions can help a lot. So.
That's great. I find that's a really interesting perspective. I think because it's easy for an actor to sort of go in a room and just completely overthink everything and not just be in the moment and just being simple about the whole thing. I know I've definitely done that. But no, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on here and chatting it through. And it's been a joy. I've really enjoyed just chatting film with you. So thank you so much.
Really, you've made it so easy, and as I say, usually it's sort of behind the scenes. So I'm never particularly good on this. That's your
that's good. That's good.
No, absolutely. No, you made this very easy and lovely. So
thank you. I'm so sorry. We've overrun by like an outrageous amount of time. So I'm sorry it's been so long. But thank you again, and all the best with the rest of your day. It sounds like you've got a busy one.
No, and thank you for taking the time and just being so lovely to have a chat with. Brilliant. Thank you.
Take care. All right.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
It's a Laughing Film, motherfucker. Subscribe and like and follow.
Thank you to our guest Lucinda, and thank you to Sydney and the rest of the team for making this happen. The Diplomat is on Netflix now, and the new Aquaman, The Lost Kingdom, is out later this year. And thank you as always to our sponsor, BetterHelp.